Have you ever noticed that the strongest prison in the world is not built from steel? It's built from invisible limits. No bars, no chains, no locked doors. And yet millions of people wake up inside it every single morning. The frightening part is this: they don't even realize they're prisoners. They call it being realistic. They call it being careful. They call it waiting for the right time. But underneath all those respectable words lives something much older, something much quieter, something far more dangerous: fear. Let me tell you something. Fear rarely announces itself by saying, "I'm here to destroy your future." No, it arrives wearing a disguise. It says, "Maybe tomorrow." It whispers, "You're not ready." It gently convinces you that one more week of preparation will somehow change everything. Then 1 week becomes 1 year becomes 10. And suddenly you wake up wondering where your dreams disappeared. Here's what most people don't understand. Dreams don't usually die because life attacks them. They die because hesitation slowly starves them. Think about this for a moment. Imagine placing a tiny tree inside a small flower pot. At first, it grows beautifully. Green leaves, strong branches, everything looks healthy, but after a while, something strange happens. The roots reach the edges of the pot. They begin circling themselves. Eventually, the tree stops growing. Not because it has reached its potential, but because its environment convinced its roots there was nowhere else to go. Now ask yourself, how many people have become that tree? How many brilliant minds are living inside pots they outgrew years ago? How many incredible talents have accepted average lives simply because they confused comfort with destiny? I learned something years ago. The greatest limitations in life are almost never physical. They're psychological. A mountain can stop your body. Only your mind can stop your future. Let me share a story with you. There was a man who worked in the same warehouse for 23 years. Every morning, same alarm, same coffee, same road, same machine, same complaints. Every evening he would come home exhausted. His children believed he hated Mondays. His wife believed he hated his job. His friends believed he hated life. But one evening, his youngest daughter asked him a question that completely shattered him. She looked up and said, "Dad, what did you want to become before you became tired?" Children have a remarkable way of asking questions adults spend years avoiding. He couldn't answer, not because he didn't know, because he remembered. He remembered the business idea. He remembered the notebook full of inventions. He remembered the dream of building something meaningful. He remembered the excitement that once kept him awake at night. And then he remembered exactly when he buried it, not after failure, before he ever tried. That night he sat alone in his garage, no motivational music, no audience, no applause, just silence. And for the first time in decades, he admitted something to himself. He wasn't afraid of failing. He was afraid of discovering what he was actually capable of. Because success changes responsibilities. Success demands growth. Success asks you to become someone you've never been before. Sometimes people cling to mediocrity because mediocrity feels familiar. Pain can become comfortable if you've carried it long enough. Let me tell you something. Your habits are introducing you to your future every single day. Not your intentions, not your wishes, not your motivational videos, your habits. Every action is a vote. Every decision is a brick. Every morning either builds your future or strengthens your excuses. Think about a river. Have you ever noticed how rivers shape mountains? Not through force, through consistency, drop after drop, day after day, year after year. The mountain appears powerful. The water appears weak. But time always reveals which one truly possesses strength. Discipline is like that river, tiny, ordinary, almost invisible, until one day people call you extraordinary. They never witnessed the thousands of ordinary moments that created the miracle. Here's what most people don't understand. The world celebrates outcomes, Life rewards processes. People admire confidence. Confidence is simply the interest earned after investing in preparation. People admire courage. Courage often begins as trembling legs that refuse to walk away. People admire greatness. Greatness usually looks incredibly boring while it's being built. Wake up, ride, practice, fail, adjust, repeat. Nothing glamorous, everything meaningful. I met a musician once who practiced alone in a tiny room for nearly 12 years before anyone applauded. People called him an overnight success. Overnight, 12 years hidden from the spotlight. Do you see how easily the world misunderstands success? They notice harvests. They ignore planting seasons. They admire skyscrapers. They never celebrate foundations. Imagine watching someone build a cathedral. For months, all you see is dirt, concrete dust, steel. You might think nothing beautiful is happening. Yet the invisible work determines whether beauty can stand for generations. Your character is that invisible foundation. Your discipline is invisible. Your integrity is invisible. Your patience is invisible. Until suddenly, they're visible everywhere. Think about this for a moment. If someone handed you $1 million today, would your problems disappear? Perhaps some would. But imagine handing $1 million to someone who lacks discipline. The money disappears. Imagine handing opportunity to someone who lacks preparation. Opportunity disappears. Imagine handing success to someone who lacks character. Success disappears. Life doesn't just give us what we desire. Life often allows us to keep only what we've become capable of managing. That changes everything, because now the question isn't, how do I become successful? The deeper question becomes, who must I become so success feels natural? That's an entirely different journey. Let me tell you another story. A young woman wanted to run a marathon. She had never exercised seriously. The first morning, she barely completed 5 minutes, she cried. Not because running hurt, because reality shattered the fantasy she had about herself. Most people quit right there. Not because progress is impossible, because identity is uncomfortable to challenge. Every new level of life requires saying goodbye to an older version of yourself. The woman returned the next morning. 5 minutes became 7. 7 became 10. 10 became 15. Nothing spectacular. No viral videos. No medals. No interviews. Just quiet consistency. Months later, she crossed the finish line. Everyone congratulated her for completing the marathon. She smiled politely because she knew the marathon wasn't won that day. It was won every morning. She chose not to negotiate with herself. Here's something fascinating. Your brain constantly tries to protect you, but it cannot distinguish between danger and discomfort. Making a presentation, the brain says, danger. Starting a business, danger. Talking to someone you've admired for years, danger. Changing careers, danger. Learning a difficult skill, danger. Yet none of those situations necessarily threaten your survival. They threaten your comfort. And your comfort often disguises itself as logic. That's why fear sounds intelligent. Fear gathers evidence. Fear builds convincing arguments. Fear presents statistics. Fear reminds you of past mistakes. Fear becomes a brilliant lawyer defending a prison sentence you never deserved. Think about this. Every incredible invention once sounded impossible. Every historic achievement looked ridiculous before it became obvious. Every pioneer appeared unrealistic until reality caught up with vision. If history teaches us anything, it teaches us that today's impossibility often becomes tomorrow's normal. So why should your own transformation be any different? Let me tell you something. 2027 isn't magical because of the calendar. Years don't transform people. Decisions do. You could enter 2027 carrying exactly the same habits, exactly the same fears, exactly the same excuses, and wonder why nothing changed. Or you could become someone who enters 2027 with a completely different mind because environments matter. But identity matters more. People spend enormous energy trying to change circumstances. Very few invest equal energy changing themselves. A farmer cannot control rain. He can control preparation. A sailor cannot control wind. She can control the sails. You cannot control every opportunity. You can absolutely control your readiness when opportunity finally arrives. That's why preparation is an act of faith. You're working today for results that haven't appeared yet. You're planting seeds you'll harvest later. And that's difficult because modern life rewards immediate gratification. Everything arrives quickly. Mass entertainment, food, information. But meaningful transformation still obeys ancient laws. Plant, wait. Grow, harvest. There are no shortcuts around seasons. I learned something from watching craftsmen, not influencers, not celebrities. Craftsman, a master carpenter, touches wood differently than a beginner. Not because his hands are stronger, because his attention is deeper. Mastery is attention sustained over time. What if success has less to do with talent and far more to do with the quality of your attention? Imagine giving one focused hour every day toward one meaningful skill. No distractions. No checking notifications. No comparing yourself to strangers. Just complete attention. 1 hour. Now multiply that across hundreds of days. Would you remain the same person? Impossible. Transformation becomes inevitable. Here's what most people don't understand. The opposite of distraction isn't concentration. The opposite of distraction is purpose. Purpose naturally organizes attention. Without purpose, everything feels equally important. And when everything feels important, nothing truly receives your best energy. Let me ask you something. If someone secretly recorded your daily habits for the next 90 days, without listening to your words, without reading your goals, without knowing your dreams, would they correctly predict your future? That question has extraordinary power because habits leave fingerprints. Your future isn't hiding. It's quietly rehearsing itself through what you repeatedly choose. Imagine carrying 2 backpacks. One contains fear, the other contains growth. Every morning you choose which one to wear. Fear says, avoid mistakes. Growth says, collect lessons. Fear says, protect your image. Growth says, build your character. Fear says, stay where you're accepted. Growth says, go where you're challenged. The strange thing is, both backpacks feel heavy at first, but only one becomes lighter with time. The other grows heavier every year. Regret is accumulated weight. Courage is temporary weight. Choose carefully. I remember speaking with an elderly gardener who spent over 50 years tending the same piece of land. I asked him what the biggest lesson nature had ever taught him. He smiled and said, "The seed never argues with the darkness." I asked him what he meant. He replied, "It doesn't complain because it's buried. It doesn't panic because no one sees it. It simply keeps becoming what it was created to become." Those words stayed with me because so many people believe invisible seasons are wasted seasons. But perhaps the unseen years are where the strongest roots are quietly forming. Perhaps obscurity isn't punishment. Perhaps it's preparation. Perhaps the silence you've been living through isn't evidence that nothing is happening. Perhaps something inside you is becoming strong enough to carry what comes next. And when you begin seeing your difficult seasons that way, even pain starts teaching instead of merely hurting. That's when your relationship with obstacles begins to change. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this trying to build within me?" And that single shift in perspective can completely transform the way you walk through adversity. Because every challenge introduces you to a version of yourself you've never had to become before. Every setback asks for a new level of patience. Every disappointment demands a deeper level of faith. Every failure invites greater wisdom, not automatically. Only if you stay curious instead of becoming bitter. Here's something I want you to think about. Imagine two blacksmiths standing beside identical pieces of steel. One sees a useless chunk of metal. The other sees a future sword, same material, different vision. Your life often works exactly the same way. What you call limitations, someone else calls raw material. What you call weakness, someone else recognizes as the beginning of strength. Because perspective determines possibility. And once your perspective begins to change, something remarkable starts happening inside your mind. You stop looking at closed doors as permanent endings. You begin wondering what kind of person you need to become before the next door opens. That's a completely different conversation, because now your energy isn't being wasted arguing with reality. It's being invested in preparing for opportunity. And preparation has a way of attracting possibilities that panic never will. Think about this for a moment. There are people with fewer resources than you, less education than you, less experience than you, who somehow continue moving forward. Not because life is easier for them, but because they stopped waiting to feel fearless before taking the next step. They discovered something that changes everything. Fear doesn't always disappear before action. Very often, it begins to fade because of action. Which means if you spend your life waiting for confidence to arrive first, you may spend your life waiting. The first courageous conversation, the first application, the first business idea, the first workout, the first apology, the first investment in yourself, they all have something in common. They ask you to move before certainty arrives. And that's where so many futures quietly disappear. Not in dramatic failures, but in ordinary moments where someone whispers to themselves, maybe later. Now imagine if, instead of saying maybe later, you asked yourself one different question. What if, instead of saying maybe later, you asked yourself one different question? What kind of life is waiting on the other side of this decision? Think about that. Not next year, not 5 years from now. Right now, because every decision creates a direction, and every direction eventually becomes a destination. Most people believe their future suddenly arrives one morning. It doesn't. Your future quietly introduces itself through today's smallest choices. Let me tell you something. The biggest turning points in life often don't feel dramatic. There are no fireworks, no orchestra playing in the background, no giant sign in the sky announcing that your life has changed forever. Sometimes transformation begins with something as simple as waking up 30 minutes earlier, reading 10 pages, walking instead of scrolling, making one difficult phone call, choosing water instead of another unhealthy habit, saving $20 instead of spending it impulsively. Tiny decisions, massive consequences. Here's what most people don't understand. Life is rarely changed by one gigantic event. Life is usually redirected by thousands of microscopic decisions that almost nobody notices. Imagine standing 1 degree off course while sailing across the ocean, just 1 degree, almost invisible, harmless, it seems. But after thousands of miles, you don't arrive in the next town. You arrive on an entirely different continent. That is exactly how habits work. You don't notice them changing your life today. You notice them changing your destination years later. That's why discipline feels expensive in the moment, but regret charges interest forever. I learned something years ago while watching an old watchmaker. His hands were calm, steady, calm. Every tiny gear mattered. Every microscopic adjustment mattered. I asked him why he spent so much time on pieces nobody would ever see. He smiled. If the hidden parts are careless, the visible hands will eventually stop. What wisdom? Everyone wants visible success. Very few respect invisible precision. Everyone wants applause. Few people enjoy preparation. Everyone wants the championship trophy. Almost nobody falls in love with ordinary Tuesday mornings. Yet ordinary Tuesday mornings create extraordinary Saturdays. The audience only sees the performance. Life remembers every rehearsal. Let me ask you something. Who are you when nobody is watching? Not who you pretend to be. Not who your social media profile suggests. Who are you when you're alone? Because that private person is building the public future. Character grows in silence. Reputation grows in public. People spend years protecting reputation while neglecting character. But character eventually reveals itself, always. Think about a bridge. People admire its beauty, its size, its engineering. But what they never see are the thousands of stress tests performed before anyone trusted it. Would you drive across a bridge that had never been tested? Of course not. Then why do we expect ourselves to carry enormous responsibilities without allowing life to test us first? Your difficult season may not be delaying your purpose. It may be strengthening your foundation. Every disappointment, every delay, every obstacle, every unexpected detour may be preparing your mind for a responsibility your current version couldn't yet sustain. Let me tell you another story. There was a young boxer who desperately wanted to become a champion. Every day, he trained harder than everyone else. He hit the heavy bag until his hands bled. He ran before sunrise. He lifted weights. He sacrificed parties. He sacrificed comfort. Yet every important match, he froze. His coach noticed something unusual. The problem wasn't his body. It was the conversation happening inside his head. Before every fight, he silently repeated, "I hope I don't embarrass myself." Read that again. His training prepared him for victory. His thoughts prepared him for defeat. One sentence. Repeated thousands of times. Eventually, his coach changed only one thing. Before every training session, instead of asking him how strong he felt, he asked, "What are you teaching your mind today?" That question changed everything. Because your mind is always listening, even when you think nobody else is. Every excuse becomes instruction. Every complaint becomes instruction. Every belief becomes instruction. Your subconscious never argues. It simply practices whatever you repeatedly tell it. If every morning you whisper, "I'm always unlucky," your mind begins searching for proof. If every morning you whisper, "I can learn anything if I stay committed," your mind starts searching for opportunities. The world may not change overnight. Your perception certainly can. Here's what most people don't understand. Your words are architects. They design the rooms your thoughts eventually live inside. That's why language matters. Not because positive thinking magically changes reality, but because clear thinking changes behavior. Behavior changes habits. Habits change identity. Identity changes destiny. Think about this for a moment. Imagine planting two gardens. One receives attention every day. The weeds are removed. The soil is healthy. The plants receive water. The second garden is ignored. Which one grows faster? Here's the surprise. Both. One grows flowers. The other grows weeds. Life doesn't stop growing because you're not paying attention. Neglect is still a decision. Your mind works exactly the same way. If you don't intentionally plant courage, fear grows naturally. If you don't intentionally build discipline, distraction grows naturally. If you don't intentionally practice gratitude, comparison quietly takes over. Your mind is always becoming something. The only question is, are you deciding what it becomes? I met a teacher once who had spent nearly 40 years working with young people. I asked him what separated students who transformed their lives from those who never seemed to change. He thought for a long time. Then he answered with something I'll never forget. The successful ones stopped asking, "Is this difficult?" They started asking, "Is this necessary?" Powerful. Because many necessary things are difficult. Exercise is difficult. Honest conversations are difficult. Saving money is difficult. Forgiveness is difficult. Learning new skills is difficult. Admitting mistakes is difficult. But difficulty doesn't determine value. Necessity does. Too many people organize their lives around comfort. Very few organize their lives around purpose. Purpose changes everything. When your purpose becomes clear, sacrifice begins making sense. When your purpose becomes clear, temporary discomfort becomes an investment. When your purpose becomes clear, you stop measuring life by convenience. You begin measuring it by meaning. Let me tell you something. There will always be people who misunderstand your journey. Some will laugh when you start. Some will doubt when you struggle. Some will criticize when you improve. And some will applaud only after you've succeeded. Never confuse applause with belief.